start by introducing myself and SIP. We are a organization that teaches fundraising out in the community to fundraising and nonprofit professionals. We shoot. Our mission, as you can see, is to help nonprofits significantly increase their fundraising capabilities and the impact they have in their communities. And I'll stop right there because that's really what we are aiming to do. We do this with a proven curriculum that is based on the donor relationship cycle that all of you know well. And then just a little bit about myself. My name is Angela Beard. A lot of you know me from these seminars, which we usually do in person and online, but again, current circumstances have made me very glad that we had the online up and running. So I've been with Stanford for 2 years now, spent more than 20 years in fundraising and almost 10 years as an educator at the higher education level. I'm going to moderate this panel, and in a minute I'll introduce our 4 wonderful panelists that you believe you can see on the side there. So what we want you to get out of this, there are about a zillion webinars going on right now. Your inboxes are full from how to do an event online, how to make an interesting Zoom meeting. We thought that we would really want to create a space where you can listen to your peers who have really done some magnificent work in the last 6 weeks to 2 months, or our Jen that you'll meet are centrally located enough that she has a really good overview of what's going on in the nonprofit community. Then you'll have the chance to ask questions and share your ideas or ask for help or support or whatever you need, because it's hard right now, right? And hopefully out of all this you'll get some tips to meet your own challenges. So a little bit about the context of why we are, and I want to especially welcome, those of you joining us with this Learn with CityU initiative, which we've created in response to the impacts of COVID-19. For this and more live resources, we have a link on our website, cityu.edu/learnwithcityU. And there are a lot of our past presentations there also. So if you find that helpful, I hope, and we're glad you joined us. So the context most people are pretty familiar with. We've had a stay-at-home order here in Washington State, which is CIT's territory, since St. Patrick's Day. And that, of course, has meant to nonprofits that anywhere people gather, they lose the revenue from their performances or their school or their rental spaces or whatever they are in business of doing. There's also in some sectors an increased demand for services, social and human service. We have 30 million people unemployed in the country now. I got that right after today's report. So the demand for food and services is rising. There have been impacts on related to equity, especially with school students, and workers who are asked to work at home. Do they have access to technology? Do they have the internet in their homes? And then just plain sustainability, a lot of folks are experiencing layoffs and closures and wondering probably if they're ever going to be able to start out business again. So let's support each other in that. Anyone want to share any other outcomes that the pandemic has caused for you? You can put it in the Q&A box, which is down at the bottom of your screen, and that's where all your Q&A, and we've got some already. Great. So how is COVID impacting you? If you want to share, I'll call out some answers. I know, CityU is working from home. We actually managed quite quickly to, because we do educate online, to transition all of our staff to online work. We'll get into how the other speakers have felt the impact in just a minute. But right now, everyone's pretty quiet, so we'll move on. All right. going. So I'm going to introduce our panelists quickly, and they are going to tell you a little bit more about themselves when we get into their remarks. We have Colleen Borst, who's with Velocity Dance Center. She's a development director there. We have Jen Gagner, who is with 501 Commons as their nonprofit navigator. James Lovell, who is with Neighborhood House as their director of development. And Sara McNeish, who's the director of development at the Multi-Service Center in Federal Way. So let's start off by asking our panelists, oh, and here's 501 Commons information. They have a lot of resources available to us. So why don't I start with Jen? And I know, right? And why don't you tell us a little bit about your nonprofit and then what you've seen in the nonprofit community in terms of how people are adjusting to this COVID business, for lack of a better word. I don't want to, pandemic, drama, all that, right? What are you seeing out there?
Okay, thank you, Angela. It was pretty funny how we worked out that order there.
Yeah, indeed.
So first, I just welcome everyone. The first thing that I just want to share with you, I am the new resource navigator at 501 Commons. I've been with 501 Commons since the last week of January. So I actually had only been with the organization for a little over a month before this crisis hit. But I spent the last 10 years in development, and I was a development director, as recently as December. So I'm not on the front lines, technically, but I am on the front lines in that my role with 501 Commons, one of my roles is to be the first point of contact for our information and referral service. So that means, and I love it, and I wanted this position to be able to do that, to be in a position where I could, help work with other organizations and help problem solve. So, so I shared this just first to make sure that everyone understands what 501 Commons does, in case you're not familiar with 501 Commons. We are a nonprofit ourselves, and we are, our philosophy is to meet organizations where they're at. So as far as fundraising goes in the age of this, I call it the COVID crisis, we don't have just one particular rule or set of guidelines that we're sharing with everyone, because we meet organizations where they're at, and we help organizations recognize their own strengths and their own capacities and work from there. And so what I have seen in the last, let's say, since this started, every case and every client that I've helped, their situation has been a little bit different. So there really is no one size fits all for everyone. I also want to make sure that you know that everything that I'm saying here, I'm here representing 501 Commons, but I'm also here as someone who's been in development for over 10 years. And so anything that I share here is actually my own professional experience and advice, and not the official advice of 501 Commons. Again, exactly for that reason, because we try to meet you where you're at. And so every organization has different sets of issues or factors. So first, Angela, would you mind sharing your screen again, just so we can go to the next slide, because I do want to share those links.
Of course.
Sorry.
No, it's quite all right.
I just want to get this slide out of the way.
Yeah, it's coming.
Okay.
There.
So I believe that this PowerPoint is going to be sent out to everyone and shared, and in that case, those hyperlinks will be active. I wanted to share these five pages that are on our website. Well, 4 plus an email address. Just because anyone who's been on our website, it is very, very dense with information and resources. And so this is what I really wanted to call out for you. The first one, of course, is our request for assistance form. So this is it's one form that we have out there for organizations who are looking for help for anything. And that could be coming to me to help work through an issue, or need advice about something, or referral for something. It could be that you need, HR services, or or anything like that. So when you get this link, bookmark that. So that's the best way to reach out to us and say, hey, we need help, we need advice for something. The second link is actually a link to our nonprofit resource directory and our tools and best practices page. And that's where you'll find not only the directory with consultants and experts that we have vetted, we've gone through an application process and called their references, but also the tools and best practices pages are, again, dense and full of information and a lot of resources there for a wide range of issues or concerns. The third one, I wanted to bring that up, that we do have the 5 elements of a healthy nonprofit assessment, which is also completely free. And that would be a good opportunity if you need to sort of take a step back and really look at your whole organization and what's going on, not just the fundraising portion of it. And then our learning connections, which is where we basically have it as a storehouse for all webinars and learning opportunities that not just we offer, but are being offered in the community. So also, if you hear of any webinars or anything like that that you don't see in our learning connections, please reach out, because we try to list everything that's in the community. It looks like it would be of value. And then if we can go back, this is also very important. I'm not going to talk about the CARES Act beyond just this right here, but I did want to share with everyone that if your organization applied for a PPP loan and you are denied or it's been stalled, okay, not that you're brand new at it and you haven't applied yet, but you've gone through the process and you've been denied or stalled, this is actually an email address we have set up. We do have a few people working on this to help organizations kind of shepherd through the system and figure out where the roadblock is, basically just to work with you through that application. So 5 very important links there that you'll get when Angela sends out the PowerPoint. So what do I have to say about fundraising and events though? First off, I've talked with a lot of clients. Obviously, I can't share anything specific about this organization or that organization, but in general, the advice that I've been trying to give and trying to work with organizations on, first off, understanding that there's no one right answer, right? But as trained development professionals, we all have been trained in best practices, and falling onto those best practices, I think, is probably a good place to start thinking about what's happening with your organization. The very first thing I tell people when they call me is breathe and accept that this is what it is. The thing is, everyone is experiencing this, and it's not just in Washington State or in this country, it's global. Everyone is experiencing this. So we're not alone. No one is alone in this. No donor or constituent is going to question why you're struggling in this crisis. Right? There just won't even be questions about it. So it's okay. Just take that moment and breathe. I would recommend that you take stock in where you're at. Okay, and again, that assessment can be helpful as well. Revisit your development plan. Look for opportunities somewhere else in your development plan. If your event revenue is removed or is diminished this year, where else are there opportunities in what you've had planned out for the year, okay? And if you don't have a development plan yet, you should go ahead and take the time to try to do that for your organization. Do you need to create additional campaigns? Or, just look for those places. Utilize your board. Your board of directors, they are responsible for the financial health of your organization. So try to think through how best to utilize them and to get them on board to help with whatever the new direction you need to pivot is. And obviously, Angela, you reminded me of the donor relationship cycle that Sanford focuses on. I would definitely look at that as well, to think about who your community champions might be, who are your constituents that are most engaged with the organization, and where are there opportunities there to work with them. And just try to think outside the box. I know that sounds cliche, but there's no better time to start thinking creatively and outside the box than right now.
Jen, I'm going to interrupt you just for a minute and let the audience see that we have another page of resources that I found. And
Sure.
especially in this bridge span link, there are a lot of good articles about, your strategic clarity, what it takes to be financially healthy, how your leadership might want to consider behaving that will complement what Jen is talking about. Why don't we check in with our other panelists? And I would love for the three of you to tell us a little bit about your nonprofit and then give us an example of how your fundraising strategy changed under the current restrictions. James, can we start with you?
Sure. So hello, everyone. I'm James Love. I'm the Director of Development and Advancement with Neighborhood House. A little bit about Neighborhood House. Size-wise, we're about 23 million a year. We're human services. About half of our work is free preschools for families experiencing poverty, and the other half are programs for youth and adults experiencing poverty, including folks who are unemployed, folks who are aging. I just had a list that disappeared. We also have programs for individuals with disabilities and individuals experiencing homelessness. And there's about 300 staff at Neighborhood House, and 7 of them work on the development team. So that our work covers grant writing, communications, and fundraising events and major donor type work or donor work for the entire organization. So some context around who we have is we do have a major giving manager, and he is always coordinating large events, whether it's for our events or other pieces. Development associate, who is the project manager for the fundraising events and donor work we do. Corporate and foundation relations manager and grant writer, who focuses on sponsorships, especially for events. There's a whole body of grant writing she does outside of that. A public grants writer, who was kind of proofreading support. A communications manager who helped us with social media posts and email messages out to our constituents, and then a capital campaign, AmeriCorps Vista, who typically would be raising capital campaign money, but with this change, we had her pivot and just provide general support to the development team. So I add that because I think it's important to know that that's where, for our event, the success was completely based on the strength of our team working well together. And I think that's relevant because the kind of keys, I think what I'll do is I'll explain what our event was going to look like, and then I'll give some detail about what we ended up doing. So typically we have a fundraiser. It's usually the last couple weeks of March or the first week of April. And it's about a 75 to 90-minute event, depending on the time of the year. I mean, the program content. We have about 450 to 500 people who come. It's a breakfast, so it's not, not something where folks are having to rush off to their later day appointments, but we definitely have a hard deadline of getting folks out by 9 a.m. So we run a pretty tight program. We have an MC who's the local broadcaster. Our board president does a welcome. We have a keynote. Our executive director does a speech. We have an agency video that we produce every year, and that builds up to an ask. So we usually have a performance as well, but it's not a lot of different components, and we try to keep it fairly consistent because we know that that's what we've seen gets our story out and helps us engage folks and get them to the rest of their day. So we had to make a few changes this year, obviously, with the event no longer being live. So it was about a month before the event. It's like March 4th or 5th. And we had to make a decision to cancel the live event or not, because at this point, the governor had not forbade gatherings over 250 people. So we actually had to just make the decision that we would essentially forego our deposit and try to run forward with an event that was done either with a live online event or a pre-recorded. We had the option to postpone, but at the time we said, do we really think this is going to be over by, one option was May 5th. And we said, gee, I don't think it's going to be over by May 5th. So it was some guesswork, but we did use the best science we had coming out of countries and regions that had experienced the virus already and said, it looks like this thing lasts a little longer. Obviously now that seems like a good decision, but we didn't know that at the time. We could have been wrong. But we made the decision to do a pre-recorded event that after watching a few others that were live, we decided with the resources we had and the story we wanted to tell, we knew we wanted to keep ours short because we didn't think that by April 8th, folks would be would have the same kind of time availability they might normally have to attend a 90-minute event. We said, we think folks are going to be loading things up back to back. And that's certainly been my experience with Zoom meetings and Teams meetings and all these other things. So we landed on a 15 to 20 minute pre-recorded event. And something that we had to evaluate was, if you're doing a live event that's a little longer, there's probably time to do some interesting things where you're interacting with your audience and there's questions or there's folks doing shout outs. With a shorter event, it made sense for us that we didn't have that option. We didn't want any audience interaction, not because we don't like interacting with our donors and supporters, but because we had to run a really tight narrative flow with all of our content. And we didn't want folks thinking about how they're going to chat or respond or anything. So now, a month later, I think it's different because more of the world is used to the online interaction that you would get with a live Facebook event or a Zoom event. But again, this was, 2 or 3 weeks in, we were having to make the decision whether or not we were going to run it live or pre-recorded. So I think that leads to just my general tips, and I could talk at length about all the decisions we made to run with our event. Long story short, real quickly, we hit our goal. And we were delighted to hit our goal for the year, for the event. But what we had to do was build a culture on our team of saying, you know what, I disagree. Here's why. Here's my thought. And being ready for your disagreement to then be shot down and have someone else say, you know what, I disagree. Here's why, and run with it. Bring as much evidence as you can. When you're saying you disagree, say, it just feels funny. And that's okay if your team has trust. Sometimes our teams don't have enough trust to do that. So we rely on saying, here's another example. Here's an agency's video that came out 2 weeks ago. Here's one that I think is coming out in a week. And here's the kind of interaction we're seeing around that. We don't think that's a good idea, or we don't think that's a good idea for us based on our resources. We made a decision very early on that we were not designing this as a fundraiser anymore, even though we knew we had a fundraising goal. A couple weeks before the event, so this is like mid-March, the kind of unknownness of the whole situation around COVID, we felt like we were starting to hit some of the early depression around this, emotional depression from people who support us. We said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put together a 20-minute video that tells inspiring stories about work that is happening right now. We're going to put a face on a faceless disease, and we're going to try to design some experiences for folks so that they really get an idea of what kind of small successes can happen in the community during a time when it was looking like impending doom. No one knew how working from home was going to be. And we really drilled down on that. We kept it about the clients and the staff of ours who were working with clients. And I think that was probably the key to our success, is that we took a pivot away from really heavy asks, and for us, it worked to tell stories. But we have a lot of staff who are working on the front lines of this. So that's an effective strategy for folks who have frontline staff. I know that's not going to work for everyone. So I think that's kind of, I hope that's enough texture around what our events were and our decision was. We had a goal of 175. We had over $30,000 in cost savings from no food and venue rentals and AV. And we still hit a 160. So you can kind of run the numbers on that and say, oh, well, you didn't hit your goal of 175, but we saved 30. So we actually, roughly netted 15,000 over what our budgeted goal was for the event. So we feel really good about it, but the main things, right? Be proactive, think through everything you can, but just stay reactive. Be ready to pivot, be ready to make a change. And we scrapped our plan 3 or 4 times before we got too far down one plan to scrap it again. And we're lucky that it worked, but we also would say, please reach out and ask us questions.
Thank you, James. That's really awesome. We are seeing some questions in the Q&A box. If you have them, keep them coming. We'll have plenty of time at the end to address the questions that have been typed and any you may think of after hearing our fabulous panelists. So why don't we move on to Colleen. Colleen, if you could just tell us a little bit about your nonprofit and what you have done to adjust to fundraising in the time of COVID.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Angela. My name is Colleen Borst. I am the Development Director for Velocity Dance Center. We're a fairly small arts nonprofit organization. We're up on Capitol Hill. Just for some context, our yearly budget is around $750,000. So we run it under $1 million. We have 5 full-time staff and 1 part-time staff. So we're a pretty small shop. Although right now everybody's working part-time. It was one change that we made. So we're a pretty small, scrappy place. We offer movement and dance classes, contemporary dance classes. We are also a performance space, and we are also a rental space. So we have a lot of artists that come in and rent studio space regularly to rehearse and research and just work on their pieces. We're first and foremost an artist service organization, not a presenting organization. So that's our main mission. And we knew as soon as these orders were coming down that we were going to be extremely effective. We knew we were going to have to close the studios. Most of our performances were going to have to be postponed. So immediately we were facing loss of pretty much all earned income. We also knew that our fundraising, as far as fundraising goes, our largest fundraising gala, our bash, is in late April. So we knew that was gonna have to change a lot or be canceled. So much like James, we pivoted pretty quickly, and just about every week our plans were changing. We were looking originally at moving to an online live auction, raise the paddle. We did a bunch of research. We found really great resources in Seattle. I think there's people doing really amazing things out there in terms of live galas. We also realized that to pull it off in the way that it needed to be pulled off, it was gonna be outside of our budget. We were already working on a pretty slim budget. So what we did is we decided to do an online email campaign, and we decided to do an entire week of programming that really brought people together as best as we could virtually. So that's what we did. We did kind of a basic, from a fundraising perspective, online email campaign. Our executive director started calling all of our major donors and mid-level donors as soon as we started to pivot to get a match fund set. I was building out the email, and then our email campaigns, and working with our communications manager to build out social media assets. And our artistic director was working on reconfiguring the program. We really wanted to keep our theme. Our theme was 47 degrees north, which is our longitude. Is it longitude or latitude? I can't remember. I think it's longitude. Anyways, it doesn't matter. Very specific and local, and celebrating the vibrancy of Seattle and the Pacific Northwest. So we ran with that theme. And what we did is we pulled a lot of archival footage, and we made a lot of Facebook videos where we brought in the artists, the choreographers, the dancers, the collaborators to talk about the process while the video was on, kind of like a VH1 pop-up video. And we thought they would be successful, but the amount of success that those videos turned to be was mind-blowing. We had 2,400 people were logging into these videos throughout the duration of the videos, which for us is an incredibly large number. I mean, our theater only sits 90 people, so 2,400 watching a show was great. I will also say that during all of these live bits, we had asks going out. So the choreographers were saying, this work was made possible because of Velocity. And since then, I've become an international presenter. Please give to Velocity if you can. Because of those asks throughout the programming, as well as our email campaigns, we got to 75% of our goal, which we were really, really pleased with. And, you know, we ended up, talk about a great return on investment. We didn't pay an auctioneer, we didn't pay for food, you know, so to consider that, I think we did a really, really great job. You know, other than that, we've just been pursuing every grant that we can. And there's just so much emergency funding going on right now. I will say it's pretty hard to be in the arts when all of your earned revenue is gone, and it's also pretty hard to be in the arts and be like, what right do we have to ask for funds when there's so much immediate need for social services right now? But you know, people will give, people will recognize that the arts are, and other sectors are as important, and they need to be there when we can come back to some sort of the new normal. And yeah, and if people can't give, they will ask for you. You know, they want you to survive, I think is the main takeaway. So that's what we've been doing.
That's great. Thank you very much, Colleen. Sara.
Hi, I'm Sara McNeish, and I'm the Development Director at Multi-Service Center. Multi-Service Center works with individuals and families throughout South King County who are experiencing poverty. So we have help with housing resources like rent, temporary housing, and permanent affordable housing, energy assistance, education and employment. We also operate a food bank in Federal Way and the Washington State Long-Term Care Ombuds Program, which provides advocacy for residents of long-term care facilities. Our first thing, of course, was how do we offer services remotely? You know, food bank had to transition really quickly, all that kind of stuff. Our development team is pretty small. We are 4 people right now. Our events manager left in the middle of March, non-COVID related, but so we have myself, an annual giving manager, and then also 2 grant writers who do both public and private grant writing. So we are a small team. And our biggest focus, I think, has been our communications with our donors and our volunteers and also our clients, as well as pivoting our in-person events. So we had 3 events that we have had to either cancel or adjust due to COVID so far. We had a donor appreciation event in March, a volunteer appreciation event in April, and then we have a large fundraiser in June, which is our crab feed and auction. For the smaller events, we try to just maintain contact with our volunteers. We sent them all a nice letter and a gift card in lieu of the event that we usually do. For our donors, our board members stepped up and called and did just check-in calls, not asks, not anything, just, hey, how are you guys doing through this? Here's how MSC is responding. We hope you're doing well. Please feel free to reach out if you have any comments, ideas, or questions about what we're doing. I think that was really important for us to do to maintain that connection, since a lot of our FaceTime with our donors is during our appreciation events. And so we had missed a big one that people look forward to every year. You know, we are sending out emails, being transparent, open about our needs, what's going on, but also being hopeful for the future, and that the positive things that we have seen as the community comes together to get through this together, right? And sending that message out that we will get through this and we will get through it together, I think is really important. I mean, we've had some really positive things come. We are essential services, so we have benefited from several grants. We've also had a significant increase in our donations during this time period, as well as our new donors have more than tripled during this time period from what we normally have. So we're excited for that growth in that area, but we're also cautious about the future. But, you know, keeping that hope that as the community steps up and rallies to help, that will spread through everything and continue, because we don't know what will happen in 3 months, 6 months down the line, right? So the big thing for us that has probably taken a lot of our time was our largest fundraising event, the auction that I mentioned before. And I'm glad to hear, Colleen and James, that you guys did very well, because ours is not until June, so I don't know how well we will do. We have transitioned to, I guess, a semi-virtual event. We're having an online auction. We have 2 raffles, one that we already had, and then we're doing another golden ticket raffle. We had some a donation that we could not use as an online auction item, and so we transferred that into like a golden ticket where there's only 100 tickets available at $100 a piece. Things like that to kind of increase our revenue. We decided to cancel the event or pivot it pretty early in mid-March, even though it was a June event, because we were, like others have mentioned, about to have to spend a lot of on our expenses. We had deposits that were coming up, stuff like that, that would make our expenses increase. And if we made the decision at that point to cancel, we would not have those expenses. And we were also mid point in getting our sponsorships and our items for our auction. And we felt that getting more of those would be difficult. We didn't feel like we could ask restaurants to give us donations, or would people be traveling, just that unknown. And would people be willing to come to an event in June, even if, this had only lasted a couple of weeks. So those were all really things that made our decision to move to the online auction the right one for us. We also want to make it fun and engaging. So we're looking at ways. We're going to do a 20-minute, 15-minute Facebook Live with our CEO and our MC. We're going to do kind of a raffle drawings, impact, but also make it fun. We're thinking about trying to find, we're actually talking with a caterer about a curbside pickup of crab. So we can still kind of put some of that fun and what people look forward to into the event. And as we're continuing on and getting ready to promote the event starting next week, we're thinking of other ways to engage the community. And I think just keeping people informed and trying to put some, a little bit of normalcy as much as you can into the event with that fun. It's a lighthearted event. It's a beach theme. Trying to keep that up so that it's not all just COVID stuff, because people are inundated with that information right now. And we want our message to be a little bit different and hopeful. So.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. So we're going to shift into Q&A now. Our panelists have shared their experiences, and we would love to take your questions and hear about your experiences, if you care to share, in the Q&A box. The first one is for Colleen and Sara, it sounds like, because the question is about what kind of platforms did the talent use for live feed? Are some platforms better than other for live performances? And you said you had your CEO on Facebook Live, so I'll let the two of you give your thoughts about that.
Yeah, thanks. We have been using a lot of different platforms right now for classes. We've been using Zoom. Also, I think for paid performances, Zoom is what we're going to look into using moving forward. For free performances, which is what we prefer to do, we have found that Facebook Live is our preferred. There's a lot of room for engagement in Facebook Live, and so that's what we used for our bash primarily. Because a lot of our performances were pre-recorded, we could run the pre-recording, and then we were conferencing in via audio, the collaborators and the choreographers, who at this point are all over the world. One of our choreographers is stuck in Italy right now, so she was calling in from Italy. Her collaborators were calling in from various states in the US and talking over the performance as it was going on, a pre-recorded performance, and then answering questions that were coming in through the comment box. So that was very cool. Also with Facebook, you have the ability, there's some plugins that you have the ability to run ticker text and logos on the video with, which is really great for especially fundraising asks. You can put the fundraising ask right on the screen, and the, you know, your organization logo on the video. So that seems to be really helpful. We are also using Instagram Live a lot, especially for just conversations with our staff. That seems to be pretty popular. So those are the things that we're kind of taking into account. But as far as performances, especially if they can be free, I think that Facebook Live right now is our preferred.
So we're actually looking at doing Zoom we have an October event, and we are feeling that we need to either be hybrid or ready to switch at the drop of a dime to a virtual event if something happens in the fall. So we are already prepping for that, and we're looking at doing a Zoom platform, but we are going to hire there's a couple of people locally that are able to manage that process for us, because one of the things that we had to do in this process is admit our strengths and what we actually have bandwidth for. And so there are some good resources, local videographers and tech companies that don't charge a lot and are willing to help out nonprofits. And so that might be a good option for people to look into as well.
Okay, our next question is about recruiting board members. What are some resources you can share recruiting board members during COVID, I assume? Sara, did you want to take this one, or James? Colleen?
Jen was going to take that one.
Jen was going to take that one. We had questions about volunteers and board members, so I'm kind of trying to manage them all. Jen.
Okay, hi. You know, how recruiting board members during this COVID crisis. I think without knowing the specifics of where your organization is at, I think in general, the advice that I would give you in recruiting board members right now is to keep in mind and to continuously consider that recruitment right now, you're not going to be able to have coffee dates with any potential board members. You're not going to be able to go to networking events and, you know, shake hands, and who knows if we'll ever be able to shake hands with people ever again. So because that outreach and that recruitment is really going to be by digital, I would say the first step is to look and assess your board recruiting packet. You know, make sure that you're presenting the organization the best way that you can, with anticipating all the questions that a potential board member might have in your packet. Make sure it's tight. If you don't have a packet yet, it's the perfect time to create one. Make sure that, you know, because potential board members or people that you're going to reach out to, they're going to be learning about this opportunity through your packet, through your email, probably, you know, meeting over Zoom. Make sure that recruitment packet is really tight. As far as how else to find board members, you know, this COVID crisis, again, it's so new. I think, you know, think outside of the box again. It's going to be, you know, beyond just the standard, you know, databases that are out there for people to put list board opportunities on. This is a great time to look at your network again and look at your constituents and just try to do that type of virtual networking based on those concentric circles that are closest to you, and move out from there, which really is kind of advice that we use even, you know, in non-COVID times, non-crisis times, but we're able to cast much wider nets when we're not under these social distancing restrictions. So that's the best advice I could give right now, and I'd love if anyone else wanted to jump in on that as well.
Thank you, Jen, for that great answer. This came over the transom. Our historical parade was postponed, and we are trying to hold a virtual parade version. How can we cultivate the same energy and culture while still maintaining social distancing? Have other outside events, anyone with other outside events, share any tips for conversion tips from outside to COVID indoor social distance? And we've heard some of those already, but let's start with James and his thoughts.
Yeah, you know, I did what I could on sleuthing as I'm sitting here looking at your question, and I think FAC is the Fremont Arts Council. So I'm thinking this is the annual Solstice parade that you're talking about. And the reason I did that is not because I think there's like, I definitely don't have a one-stop quick answer for how to replace the Solstice parade, right? This is this massive cultural thing. It's got a very positive, cool, flamboyant flavor all on its own. But it actually, I think, is something, what I do have is the way we decided to do a 20-minute pre-recorded versus a 45-minute live or a 90-minute live or this or that, is we went back to some very basic things around communications, because that's a big part of what your event is going to have to rely on, which is, who is your audience? So who is it that's coming to the parade? Because if you're not designing your alternative with them in mind, then it kind of doesn't matter how good of a method or whatever it is. So who's your audience? What's your message? And then what's your method? So get your audience first, focus on who would normally come to the parade. How are you going to reach out to them? What are the platforms that are most likely to be accessible to them? What's the message you're trying to convey, right? What is it that the parade usually evokes for people? What is it that folks, it's highly participatory, right? So doing a 20-minute pre-recorded doesn't seem like a great option, because if the entire message is about participation, then I think you're going to be missing out on that if you don't have some kind of live participatory piece to it. And then you can figure out what your method is. So whether it's Zoom or an online platform, or whether it's a campaign, because I think that's another option, is to set up a 1-week campaign where folks are sending in their videos, and you are then distributing them out to a much wider audience. So you folks who would normally have marched in the parade send in their stuff. You start collating, and once every 2 days, you send out this batch that's 10 minutes long. You're just not going to be able to recreate a 1, 2, 3 hour parade online, because the attention span online is much shorter. So I think we did some campaign work for our stuff, where we had some videos from staff, and they were just walking through how they helped someone receive unemployment benefits during this time. And that helped us build some momentum to retain interest in the 20-minute phase. So if your audience is a group that's always looking for participation, then you've got to stick with that. And that's really, I hope that's of some use. But I think audience first, message second, method was always our very last thing we talked about. It was always thinking about who is it and what are we saying to them.
Thank you, James. A couple more questions. First, Sara, you already spoke about your success with volunteers. So, and audience, type in your responses if you'd like. Is any other group having trouble finding volunteers with tech support and financing background? Any tips? Maybe you could address volunteers in general, Sara, and then see what we have to say about finance and tech support.
Sure. So our food bank does not operate without volunteers. As this started, most of our volunteers in the food bank fell within the high risk category and could no longer volunteer. So we're looking at how do we replace 30 to 40 volunteers a week that drive and pick up food bank donations, that help sort that stuff, help distribute it to the community that needs it. We pretty quickly did a blog post, email. It actually got picked up by Q13 News. It was in the local paper. And we used United Way of King County has a great volunteer needs site that's set up specifically for COVID-19 volunteers. And we were just very clear about who could volunteer and what the need was and what they'd be doing. And I think we had, within 2 days of that going out, we had 27 brand new volunteers. And within the week, we were fully staffed. And we continue to get volunteer applications 2 or 3 a day. I don't know specifically how to recruit tech or financial people with those type of skills, but United Way of King County website, I think really, if you look at their COVID-19 volunteer opportunities, you can pick certain skills and what type of need is there. We've had a lot of companies that have come forward and say, hey, our employees can't be in the office right now. We want them to be doing something. What can we have them do? Can they come volunteer there? So maybe approaching companies that have employees with those type of skills that maybe aren't operating right now would be a good option. I don't know if anyone else has any other ideas.
All right. We've heard from Sara, and we have one more question, and just time for one more question. This has been a great panel. It's about grants, and the question is, what have your experiences been in seeking COVID relief grants or other grant funding during this time? Any particular challenges or tips? And James and Colleen both have been doing some grant work, so I'm going to turn it over to them.
Yeah, so the question came from, I think, Lindy Gerdes. And Lindy, because I don't know, I wasn't able to Google and see what kind of field you're in, but that also should be indicative of what I think the right approach is what's your audience? I don't know what kind of service you're providing. How is it that you're changing the community? Because there are lots of different grants out there based on what your service model is. So Colleen runs an arts organization. So her grants picture looks really different than an agency that has 90% government funding and a lot of really good support out there right now for human services funding. So for us, we're always on every listserv we can be on, even if we don't even look at half the emails. Jump on all of the government listservs, because right now, even the ones that you might think are a human services one are sharing information in a much stronger way. So you are likely to come across a little bit just from being like a prospector out there with your grants tray. So get on all the listservs you can from government agencies, and then look to the aggregators. And the aggregators are places like 501 Commons, who are intermediaries, right? And it's part of what they do is they have folks who are out there cultivating and scraping together all these random sources that are coming together. One of my favorite places to look is always the blogger Voulet, who runs Nonprofit AF. He's got some great resources, and he'll call out folks that are doing some good work and some not so good work. And you always, he's also one of my best friends, so I'm a constant shill for his work. But kind of the same thing as audience message method. So if you know you're doing arts, look for the, places that are funding arts right now. I don't know, I haven't looked in that area, but without knowing what your area is that you're serving, I can't give more guidance. But again, please just reach out. You can find my contact information on our website, and I'm happy to give any ideas I have.
Yeah, and just kind of piggybacking off of James. I mean, I work in the arts, so I start looking at the arts. I'm jumping onto the National Endowments for the Arts website to look at what they're doing. They have a lot of resources listed. I work in contemporary movement and dance, so looking at peer organizations, I cannot stress how important peer organizations are right now. We're looking at Jacob's Pillow. Jacob's Pillow is offering an aggregate of grant resources, so we're pulling off of there, checking out grant databases, also looking at we've been in constant contact with the Office of Arts and Culture and For Culture and Arts Fund, so really utilizing local and national organizations that work in the sector that we're working in, and our peer organizations. That's how we're going to get through this, especially as smaller arts organizations. So I just can't stress the local organizations and the peer organizations enough.
Great. Thank you, Colleen. And thank you to all our fabulous panelists for taking the time to join us today. I hope that you folks who attended got something out of it. I'm sure you must have, because how could you not? These guys are fabulous. I will send out the PowerPoint with all the resources and contact information. And this has been recorded. So if you want to watch again, it'll be on YouTube. I'll send that link to you. Thanks again. We will be back in May, I'm sure, although the changing climate makes what's relevant changes by the day, but I'll figure it out and be back in May to chat with you all again. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you next month.